It's time once again for another episode of Wantrepreneur-Radio, broadcasting live from the Pro Business Channel studios in Atlanta. And now here's your host, Mark-myette.
Hey everybody, this is Mark-myette, and welcome to the inaugural program, Wantrepreneur-Radio. And for those that are wondering what Wantrepreneur really is, it's akin to those that we might know that want to write a book, want to run the marathon, want to lose 150 pounds, and it's a want. And this relates to those that are wanting or have thought about doing a business, and is entrepreneurship for you. So the basis of the program, Rich, I'm happy to say, is really getting together with people that help people get their arms around whether or not that's a possibility or not. So,
absolutely. Rich Casanova, the producer engineer for the Buckhead Studios here for Pro Business Channel. And as you were talking, I was just trying to look up on the board and be able to spell wantrepreneur. So that's my mission today. Yeah, by the end of the show, I'll be able to spell that. But we've been kicking around this idea for a while, known each other, networking events, and about your business, and very excited for the inaugural, the first ever episode of Entrepreneur Radio. And so, again, the idea here is to kind of get the word out and make connections with those folks that are like yourself, that are helping people and providing those people along their journey.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because it is a definite dynamic, as we're going to hear from our guests, that people evolve. I mean, professionally, people evolve. And part of their evolution, they get to forks in the road where they just need help. Yep. And so the guests that we'll have in the program are usually those that are very intricately involved with that process.
And you kind of touched on the life challenges that we all experience, but your emphasis is more on the business and those entrepreneurs, helping them along that journey,
or in the wantrepreneurs. Really,
yeah.
It's the folks that are, they have this desire, or in the back of their mind they have that U2 song playing. I still haven't found one I'm looking for.
Right.
But in the back of their mind, they've always wanted, or they have the desire to do something, but they're still unclear.
Right.
In regard to what could that look like, what's my wiring, how do I actually go about it, and so it's really about helping people get there.
And what's the steps? And it can be kind of a scary launching pad to make that jump. And so are these people, can it be someone from a retiree, or someone that's looking that has been transitioned out of a job or downsized? Or who is is there a likely candidate that you typically interact with? Or?
Well, the great thing about, as we'll hear from our guests, I think what we're finding is the demographics are changing. They're evolving. We have now college-age graduates that are graduating college, wondering what if. Yeah. And by the same token, we'll have people, career professionals that have been in their career for 20, 30 years, and they're at that fork in the road. Right. So it goes across multi-generations now.
Right. And then finally, in some of those cases, it can be a full-time business endeavor, or maybe a part-time venture, or
it may be, and the key word is may, because the want part is one thing, but if at the end of the day the wiring is probably not attuned to that, or it's not in their best interest to go down that road, that's probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
Really determine whether or not you have the makeup, the skill set, I call it the professional capital, to go down that road. And once they step back and go through that type of assessment, then they can proceed down the appropriate road. Sometimes I'll have people go through the assessment and they realize, I really need to find a job.
Yeah.
I probably, it's in my best interest maybe to become a 1099 contract employee, which is nothing wrong with that. That's, in some ways, that could be argued that's a form of entrepreneurship.
Right.
Right? Because you're still independent.
Well, in just this kind of day we're living in, it's just this kind of like startup mindset, and just the onslaught of so many people. And you see Shark Tank. Do people kind of get caught up in that?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And they think, oh, well, that's easy. But once you kind of give them a reality check, right?
Yeah.
For better or for worse, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And in some ways that's good, that there's all this publicity and this around it, because there are a lot of people now that are now realizing, well, if they can do it, why can't I?
There's options.
Yeah. And so which is great, because you want to empower people to at least begin to investigate whether that's an option or not.
Well, in technology and the fast world we're living in, there's so many people can work so many different capacities than in
Yep.
previous generations, not just being wireless, but remotely. And so there's a lot of doors that are open. But let's kind of jump into the show now. I think
Absolutely.
that kind of sets the stage. And before we kind of introduce our guests, maybe let folks know about mark-myette and how they might find out about you and reach out to you. I know you're a big proponent of LinkedIn.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. The best way to reach me will be, to your point, the social media outlet. So just go to LinkedIn and Mark, M-A-R-K, Myette, M-Y-E-T-T-E. 2
T's and you're good to go. All right. So let's welcome our guest here to the show and get right into it. So, first up, we want to just kind of say hi to our first guest joining us in the studio, and Joey-Sargent, and you're the CEO of Claravon Group?
Claravon Group.
Claravon Group. Okay, and founder of Solopreneur.school.
That's right. That's my latest initiative. It just started September 7th, so very new.
So tell Mark and I and the listeners and the folks a little bit about yourself before we jump into the show, what you might be chatting about and your mission.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was listening to Mark, and I think we're all entrepreneurs. I think I've been one my whole career. But I started consulting about 5 years ago, working with small to mid-market companies on how to accelerate growth and build their business. And through that process, I ended up meeting a lot of people who really felt that the solopreneur path was right for them. And so really hearing a lot of that more frequently over the past several months, I decided it made sense to create a resource for them to get information and knowledge to help them build their business if that's the path they choose. So that's what inspired me to start Solopreneur.school, and I'm just happy to be here to talk with you about it. I'm delighted that you chose me to be on one of your first shows, so great to be here.
You're welcome.
Glad to have you.
Absolutely. And mention what's a point of contact, a website, or how would folks reach out to you?
My main site is claravon.com, Claravon, and my office is 678-823-8228.
All right. We'll look forward to the conversation and finding a little bit more about it. And who do you have up next, Mark?
Well, next we have we'll be hearing about later on in the program is Randi-Levy. And Randy, welcome to the program.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me be on your inaugural show.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank
So
you.
tell us about what we'll be hearing about.
Well, I own a company called ResumeWorks, and what I do is I help people develop materials that they're going to use to conduct in job search, or if they're seeking contract work or anything that's going to help them position themselves in the marketplace. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today, helping them develop building themselves as a brand and putting themselves in the marketplace.
Excellent. And how would people reach out to you?
The best way to reach me is either through phone. My number is 404-308-2952, or you can go up on my website, which is www.myresumeworks, with an S at the end, .net.
Excellent. And so now, last but definitely we're going to be hearing a lot from in this program is kit-kammer.
Camera, you're right.
Yes,
Very
rhymes
good.
with hammer, right?
It does.
And so Kit, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll fill in the blanks as well.
Well, I first off, congratulations on your inaugural program. I'm delighted to be here. I mean, how exciting is that? And talking today, since you are a wantrepreneur, the statistic is that in the next 5 years, that 1 out of 2 of us will be self-employed in some way. And you were talking about it's all ages now. It's the kids right out of school. It's the kids right out of high school also, who now have the capability with the computers, with the smartphones, with the nothing. There's no limit anymore, and they just get started with a better idea. So we find ourselves coaching a lot of people. And do you want me to?
Oh yeah, please.
And
and you're with a group called the Impact
the Impact Group out of St. Louis.
Yes.
I'm a senior consultant, and we have 3 specialties. That we work with relocation, we work with talent development, which includes leadership development, and also career transition, which could be called outplacement, but it's easier with career transition. And that's where we see our entrepreneurs.
And you've been doing this for how long?
A long time.
Along those lines, how have you seen your role evolve?
Well, my role in particular is to flesh out whether a person is the personality, has the money, the patience, the drive, particularly the passion to be the entrepreneur and to really hit them with all those points. And I'll have them write a business plan for starting that business, and then we'll get down to the brass tacks. Do they want to be an entrepreneur outside the company, or would they like to be an intrapreneur, which means working for themselves inside a company? So, all conversations are open, but I have to give them a hard time because the SBA says, 10% of startups are going to survive. So we have to give them the questions that they need so that they don't, down the road, they don't invest time and money in something that doesn't work.
Well, from that standpoint, sometimes people will or need to be led to the conclusion that they may want to leverage their professional capital in a slightly different way.
Correct.
So how do you help people kind of navigate that?
Well, one wonderful instrument we have is the Berkman Report, which does tell you if you have the average profile of someone who starts a company. Now that we wouldn't want to block somebody or stop someone from starting a company, but there are some numbers that give us access to the likelihood of whether they would succeed. I know you've got an instrument too that you use to gauge their strength and what they would do. So I mean, this is a help for the individual who's seeking, who's searching.
And of late, more recently, how are you seeing the job market?
Well, certainly what we've seen of late are the women who are coming on strong. We had the numbers 20 years ago about the men. We knew the men, we knew their profile, we knew the families they came from, we knew the energy they had, and then, whoa, here came the women. And they're translating it differently. They're doing it differently, doing it with others differently, shaping it differently, setting up legal status differently. We are the ones who are having to learn quickly. Yeah, it's very exciting.
And also, since part of the folks that you're working with are in transition potentially because they're relocating or they've left their current role, how do you handle the stress part? How do you help them navigate that?
Well, the first thing we talk about is the emotional roller coaster and how they handle the stress. What happened in their former position? What is the story that they can tell? Story means what's agreed upon by everybody. And then tell them the likelihood of the emotions that they'll go through so they don't think that they're strange. They don't think they're unusual when they feel the stress, when they feel that they feel guilty, when they feel anxious about the future. That this is not unusual, and it does have to be gone through before they get to the other side and get ready for the next step. So?
Well, before we hear from Randy, is there a parting thought that you have from this conversation that you think is relevant for our listeners that might be kind of at this fork in the road, or know somebody that might be at a fork in the road professionally or career-wise?
Well, I might give my telephone number.
Excellent.
It's 404-974-9153.
Great. And Kit, thank you very much for joining us. And we'll be hearing from you later on in the program as we have an ongoing conversation with all of our guests.
Super.
Okay, so thank you. So Randy, welcome.
Yes, thank you.
And again, Randy her company is called ResumeWorks. And so Randy, tell us how you got involved with ResumeWorks.
Okay, great. My background is human resources, and I had spent years with a major corporation in their human resources area. Years ago when I started my family, and I was trying to figure out a way that I could continue working but still be a present mom, I found an industry that at that time was relatively young called outplacement. And I started doing contract work for some major corporations. Actually, I was traveling out of the city. And with that, I ended up landing several years later with a company called Lee Hecht Harrison, which is one of the largest corporate outplacement firms still in the world. And that's really where I got my start doing this kind of work. I was with them for over 15 years, coaching clients through career transition, helping them develop their marketing tools. And over the course of the time, clients would say to me, Do you think you can work with my daughter? Can you work with my son? My wife needs a resume, my husband, whatever. And it just got me to thinking that I saw an opportunity. And so you talked about wantrepreneur.
Yeah.
This is exactly what happened with me. And so I decided that I could do this on my own, and I started my own private practice helping people develop the tools that they're going to need to conduct an effective job search. And I think the value that I bring to my clients, and that's what I talk about my clients all the time anyway, is what's your value add, what's your value add. But I think that I help my clients determine how they're going to differentiate themselves in the market. And with doing so, I think it builds their confidence in getting in front of decision makers and talking about themselves in an impactful way.
And how has, and obviously with technology, the whole
Yes.
concept of a resume, as we know it today, has evolved.
Yes.
Right? So what's the biggest changes you've seen from the time that you started to today?
I think that probably the biggest change that I've seen is the whole value piece. It's not good enough to say that I have leadership skills. You have to be able to back it up. And I think that there's a big push there. Many sophisticated companies will do something. They'll scan resumes. They'll do a keyword search. And I hate to say this, but in many ways, looking for a job is a bit of a game. And you have to position yourself so that you match what the employer is looking for. And so being able to modify or adjust your resume in order for it to match the needs of the employer, I think is really important. So being relevant is a really important thing. Used to be that you'd create one resume and that was kind of it, and that doesn't work anymore. And so you're constantly having to reevaluate your resume and making sure that it's saying what the employer wants you to be saying.
Right. And you mentioned your clients.
Yes.
So today, what's the profile of your clients look like?
Oh, gosh. You know what? The profile of my client is so varied.
Yeah.
I work quite a bit with executives, people who, for one reason or another, have decided they're ready to do something different. I work quite a bit with career changers. I work a lot with people that have taken time out of the workplace, maybe to raise a family, and then they've decided to get back into the marketplace. And for those people, this is really an eye-opener. And then on occasion, I work with college students, which to me is a lot of fun because they're like a piece of clay that we get to mold a little bit, and I don't think they always know the value that they can bring. And so that's always a lot of fun, too. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. And so I imagine because of the evolution of social media.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you also, so how does a resume and LinkedIn profiles, how do they work together?
Well, that's a great question, because what I tell my clients is when they're in the midst of a job search, from a business perspective, what I want them to think about is they are getting ready to launch themselves into the marketplace. They're doing like a new product or a new business launch. And developing the resume is the first piece of building themselves as a brand. And when you have a brand, you have to have consistency in messaging. So what that means is that the things you include in your resume should match the things that you want to talk about when you're networking, the things you want to talk about when you're interviewing, and also the things you want to put into your LinkedIn profile. So we want to make sure that we have a very clear, concise, and consistent message throughout the entire job search process. So LinkedIn matches the content that you put into your resume.
Well, and I know we'll be hearing back from you in our open dialogue that we'll be having.
Great.
So, but before we go, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Randy?
My number is 404-308-2952, and I think that's the best way to reach out to me.
Excellent.
Great, thank you.
All right, Randy. And now we're being joined by Joey-Sargent. Joey, so you are the founder of Claravon?
That's right, Claravon Group.
Yes, and so what is a Claravon?
It's a mashup, actually. Clarity, vision, and insight, which is what I bring to my clients.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
And in many ways, you are the wantrepreneur that took the step, jumped off the high dive, and formed your consulting group, right?
Yes, yes.
So what was your motivation and the need that you identified when you started the firm? Was it 5 years ago?
It was 5 years ago,
Yeah.
yes. And it's great to be with you because I know we first met when I had just recently started the business and
yeah.
took a speaking engagement.
And you're
so
still
that's great.
here.
And I'm still here. So that's, you know all the statistics about most businesses
Yes.
fail, and I'm still here. So
Good for
I'm
you.
excited about that. But I actually had my own business, a small marketing agency, early in my career. I spent a little bit of time in corporate, and then thanks to a hurricane, decided to reinvent myself, moved to a different town and started this small business, and it had advantages and disadvantages. So I closed it after about 2 years and came to Atlanta to work with UPS. So I went from being self-employed to working for a major major corporation, which was sort of a shock to the system. But I always knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to go out on my own again.
Yes.
So fast forward several years, and the opportunity presented itself as the economy went through the downturn a few years ago. And I said, why not? This is the right time. So, and I find that a lot with solopreneurs, and I've just launched this Solopreneur.school. I find that a lot of people have to have a catalyst to get them going. They may be entrepreneurs sitting on the back burner for a long time, and then something in life happens that inspires them to go forward.
And along those lines, so tell us, your motivation to start your new portal called Solopreneur.
Yes.
Right? And so how do people get to that new portal?
It's solopreneur.school. It's one of
Okay.
the new domains. So took advantage of that opportunity to have a .school extension. But what happened is in my work with clients, and I love working with small businesses and with startups, I would find a lot of people who would say, I'm thinking about starting a business, your community, the entrepreneurs, and they didn't know where to go to find good resources. So how do I learn how to organize my business from a legal standpoint, financial questions, marketing questions, all of that. And I said, well, why not create a site where they can build community, but also go and get content that helps them with not only making the leap to become a solopreneur, but then how to grow their business. So that was a big part of it. Was just I kept hearing that in the marketplace. And then also through my own experience, knowing that I'd been through a lot of different things to get to where I was. And it would have been great for me to have that as well. So it's partly selfish, but also partly wanting to help all those people that are out there that really want to get going and figure out how to build a thriving business.
And if I recall, the Solopreneur is a portal.
Yes.
And so you'll be having guest bloggers.
Absolutely. I've got 10 people right now blogging
Yeah.
for me. I have folks that are writing about legal issues, intellectual property, accounting,
Yeah.
sales, all of the kind of things that you need to know about, which are, big businesses have all those departments, but when you're a solopreneur, you're wearing every one of those hats.
Right. And I'm sure you're the proponent of a book called E-Myth Revisited.
Yes, that's one of my favorite books.
That's a book written by a fellow by the name of Michael Gerber. Think of the baby food, as I tell clients. But and so and that's one of your favorite books because?
Because it really tells you what you need to do to create the focus and structure to be successful. So even when you're a solopreneur, you wear all those hats, but you don't do everything forever. You need to have an accountant. And I tell people that they've got to build that A-team right from the beginning, which is your accountant, your insurance, and your lawyer. So those are the first people you need. But then you have to think about, well, when I need to start outsourcing, when I need to get somebody help with my website, what do those jobs look like and how do you hire those people? And he goes through in that book a great process for writing job descriptions and how to identify not only everything that you're doing and prioritize it, but then also use that information to go out and find the people that you need to support you.
Yep. And I think the challenge many solopreneurs face is the concept of focusing too much in as opposed to on.
Yes.
You care to share?
Yes, and he talks about that in the business. Are you working in the business and just basically you've created yourself a new job?
Yep.
Are you working on the business and treating it like you are an executive, you are the owner of the company, and then you have a strategy and a vision for where you want to go?
Well, see, isn't this exciting stuff, Rich? So
It is. I've been listening, multitasking, and sending out messages on Twitter, on Facebook, and we have our live listener feed. So I think we're off to a great start, and what a great beginning to kind of set the stage for the folks in the studio and their expertise and the lanes that they're in, and now we get to kind of do a little round robin, as you like to say.
exactly, and so at this point, as we were all sitting listening to one another talk about what our roles are and insights that we have, we'll just open it up. Was there any comments or questions that people had as they were listening to the other guests that they'd like to chime in about?
Well, I thought it was interesting that Kit was talking about the range of emotions that people go through.
Yeah.
Because I find that solopreneurs are going through the same thing. It can be a very rocky adventure.
Right.
And maintaining control of those emotions can really make or break your ability to succeed. If you let them get to you, you just curl up in a ball and say, things aren't going the way I want them to. That's not a good sign.
Right.
I also want to add, you had talked about stress and managing stress, and it is stressful anytime that you're in transition. Change can be very stressful for people. But one of the things that I think, also to Kit's point, is that when people start making a transition, it seems overwhelming. And if they can take this big project and they can break it into bite-sized pieces and tackle one thing at a time, a lot of times that makes it a little bit easier to handle so that they're not quite so overwhelmed by the big picture and everything that goes into it.
Right. Right.
And speaking about bites and pieces, everybody wants a resume yesterday.
Yes.
You can talk to them, you can guide them, you can help them, but they want that resume.
Yeah.
And it really does help the confidence, putting that together and getting their accomplishment statements written down and all their, getting clear about what it is that they're going to present to the public.
Right.
And then
even if they're going to be looking for, starting their own business, it's still a great exercise to go through. And it's one of those things that most people put it off until they have to have it. But really, it makes sense to have one in your back pocket with the idea that, okay, if I ever need it, I'm just going to dust it off a little bit. Because when you have to start from scratch, it can be very overwhelming.
And if you're going out on your own, to that point, you need that to create a bio.
Right.
You need all this information because you have to market yourself, whether you're marketing yourself for a job or for your own business. You have to be able to promote yourself, and it's very affirmative to go through and say, these are all the things that I've accomplished, and just to remind yourself how successful you already are.
And along those lines, because each of us in our own way are, for lack of a better term, solopreneurs, right? Entrepreneurial in what we're doing. So when you started your enterprises, what did you find your biggest challenge was?
Oh, I think for me it was doing research and gathering information and being still.
Yeah.
Doing the still work that was required. As Joey had said, the attorney, the insurance, the accountant, all the things that needed to be in place at the same time that I just wanted to be out coaching. I just wanted to be advising people, finding who needed guidance in the whatever it is that they're doing next, and with starting one's own company. The still work had to come at the same time as everything else. Because otherwise, and I've coached people who've started their companies and are just doing what it is they wanted to do, and then, they don't have a bank account, they don't have a checking account, they don't have a loan from the bank, they don't have insurance, so they're not protected, they don't have an attorney, they haven't started in an official way, so IRS does not have them, in a status that they can report. And then they've got to stop what they're doing and go back and put all that together. So I think starting up quietly for me was the biggest thing.
And how about you, Brandy?
I think for me is trying to decide how I was going to attack the market. So I who do I want to be and who do I want to provide my services to?
Yeah.
And I think that was a little bit of a challenge. I mean, I have all, to Kit's point, I was all gung-ho and ready to go, and okay, now what? So it was a matter of who I wanted to go after and who was the right person for me to be working with.
Right. How about you, Joey?
Well, I'm a little bit the same way. I'm great with the checklist, so to go through business license, a bank account, all that was easy. But for me, it was much more of finding the balance between what does the market want and what am I passionate about. So when I started, everybody had laid off their marketing people, so they needed hands-on marketing, and I did a lot of that kind of work when I was getting going. But that's not really where my passion is. It's much more in the advisory type relationships with clients, coaching and consulting. So it took me a while to strike the right balance between what really fed my soul, which is why I started my business in the first place, and what clients were really looking for.
Yeah, which is the same thing we coach our clients to do, is be mindful of the market. What if you're in Atlanta, what does Atlanta have with its over 120,000 companies? Where do you fit in it? And who are you presenting to? And then get on the internet and where are you going to put your resumes, your cover letters, your everything, and what are your expectations? Yeah, all that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I think networking is really key here, too. Regardless of whether you're starting your own business or you're looking for a position, you have to put yourself out there. Mm-hmm. And not only do you have to put yourself out there, you have to have your message really fine-tuned. And I think that might be a challenge for people as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably bring up an important point, which is how to leverage the social media. Mm-hmm. And with LinkedIn, we call it our circle of influence mm-hmm. that we have. And as you probably know, when you go into LinkedIn, you can see how many first-level connections you have, second, third. And as long as you're communicating on a regular basis, relevant information, and people being aware of what your mission is, I think that's going to be important. Along those lines about mission, are there any misconceptions about what you do now that you have this medium to share? Are there any misconceptions about what you do and what your role is? Because sometimes you'll meet someone at a party and say, what do you do? Oh, I do this, and people will immediately put you into a bucket.
Sure.
So are any of you put into buckets that you just want to address right now?
Well, I find that's a challenge sometimes, and particularly because I've evolved.
Yeah.
And after spending 20-some-odd years in corporate marketing, people think, well, you just do marketing. And so it's really hard for me to make sure that people who've known me for a long time understand the full scope of what I offer. So that's a challenge when you're reinventing yourself.
Yes.
It's easier to go to people who've never met you before and tell them what you do, but for people who've known you for 15 or 20 years to say, okay, that's great, that's part of who I am, but that's not all.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really find that that's typically a problem for me, and I think part of the reason is because I really took painstaking care to come up with a title, a name for my company that really highlights what I do. I mean, obviously, I work with cover letters. I help people, coach them through the interview process. It's kind of an offshoot of that, but the mainstay of the work that I do is really resume development, and so when I came up with the name ResumeWorks, it was really with that in mind.
Mm-hmm. And then Kit.
It is difficult at times. The Impact Group started, 27 years ago, and it started mostly in relocation. Mm-hmm. And it evolved from that. Joey speaking about evolving, that we were called back in and asked, would you help our leaders now? Would you help them to know how to manage, how help the teams communicate, get people working towards the same goal? And so that's the talent development part of it, and then we also were called back in to work with those that had been let go from their organizations and who certainly had sets of skills. They just needed to be able to put those skills down in writing and be able to speak those skills to the public. And then, of course, the big key is networking. Absolutely. I had a teacher once who came to me and she said she didn't know anybody. And of course, I don't say anything when I first hear that. And I said, okay, well, help me with this. So you live in a community, right? You have a home in a community. And she said, yes, I do. I said, so does the community have some sort of a directory of the members of the community? She says, yes, it does. I said, wonderful. How many are in there? And she says, well, there are 300 houses. And I said, grand. And you know a few of the people in those houses, don't you? She said, oh, yes, and my children swim with their children over the summer, and I know even more of that. I said, great. So we'll start with some of that. And you have doctors, and you have lawyers, and you have colleagues that you've worked with over the years. Oh, and all of a sudden, the light went off. She understood that I wasn't talking something foreign. I was talking something about the person that she wants to go to that she wants to go bowling with or play tennis with. Oh, and that's another thing is Alta. In Atlanta, that's only, 40,000 people?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's growing still.
Yes. So all these things are wonderful conversations with people, helping them to know that they do know others, and those are warm contacts. They're not cold contacts. We're not asking someone to have a foreign conversation, to walk up to somebody and start the conversation about oneself. But that you go to the people you know and start with your next door neighbor. I mean, that's a rich conversation.
Speaking of rich, were you about to say something?
Wow, you're the master at segues there. Wow, nice. Didn't even hardly saw that coming. Yeah, So just want to remind our listeners you're listening to Entrepreneur Radio here on the Pro Business Channel with your host, Mark-myette. And great conversations with the guests. And this is the first ever episode, so this will be archived for those folks to reference back. I do, if we've got some time, I do have a couple of questions here for a couple of guests. So with Kit, I'm just interested in looking over your information. So Impact operates in over 30 countries and 300 coaches.
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned at the top about talent placement is one of the emphasis. So do you have a personal niche that you kind of work in?
Executive coaching.
Okay.
Would be the niche is that I get sent people who are highly thought of, but the company would like them to be better rounded and perhaps get better at their management skills, their communication skills, building their teams, communicating, understanding that there are different styles of communication and that they have a certain style and other people have different styles that might not quite be the ones that make them the happiest. So to learn how to speak to others, learn how to, what words to use, what methods to use. Yes.
Okay. And follow up to that, and I was going to ask maybe a roundtable as well for this question about marketing. That's kind of come up a couple of times. So I'm kind of intrigued. How do folks find you, right? How do people find out about your services, but also how do you find prospects or clients through Salesforce or there's certain tools or organizations? But for Kit, you mentioned about the executive placement. Are there organizations or professional groups that you kind of network with? There's a couple that come to mind that the emphasis of those groups are executives in transition.
Well, you have volunteer organizations around the city, and you've got there's training and development, and there's the SHRM,
right? Yeah,
Society for Human Resource Management, which is where you're going to get all the heads of HR. Yeah, right.
That'd probably be a gold mine, right?
That's a gold. I've been a member with them for years.
Wow.
Oh yeah. And working that, but the real key is having the conversation no matter where you are, because everyone's got individuals on their team that need an assist. They need someone to coach them to do something better, and so it's a marvelous conversation to get into it with anybody.
I find that for me, the best marketing I get is from my clients. So I would say the majority of my clients are referrals from other clients. And then I get referrals. I have relationships with outplacement firms, with career coaches, professionals in the community. But I would say networking. I mean, referrals is probably my number one source.
And Randy Resume, is that a nickname that we can go with here? Yeah.
You can. I like it.
Oh, that's good.
But I do have a question on resumes. Have you seen this evolve over time as far as when you first took on your first client with a resume? What changes have you seen from the traditional paper typed out on the typewriter, if you will, to I don't know if you've been doing resumes that long, but to the electronic version, or are they repurposing them? Is there a different style and presentation and packaging of that resume when it's placed on, say, like LinkedIn, or as opposed to, and do you coach them on distribution or sources to, because I don't think people print and just mail them out, right?
No, nobody mails anything anymore. As a matter of fact,
so what do you coach
we're getting to the point that we don't even include addresses on resumes because when was the last time you got anything by mail other than, junk mail? So, no, we leave that off. But you know what? I think the content itself is just much more robust and much more, again, the whole value piece. It used to be that so much of the resume was about job responsibilities. I was responsible for doing this.
Right.
I led these people. I managed this size budget. And you need a little bit of that on there. But what I really coach my clients to is to focus on your successes, because to me, you have to understand why somebody's making a hiring decision. They're making a hiring decision because they think that you can bring value to their organization, meaning you can either make money for them or save them money.
Right.
And so as far as I'm concerned, that's the major message we want to deliver in the resumes. We want to show that you either helped an organization make money or save money, because the thinking is if you can do that for them, you can do it for me as well.
Right.
And so the robustness, the richness of the content, I think is what has changed.
Where's the balance between an extensive resume that's very impressive to kind of short and brief and to the point, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you all have heard this. I've heard it recently a couple of times where they say there was college university studies have been done on this. Our attention span has just been
2 minutes,
right? Well,
Yeah.
it's actually no. In reality, the recent updates have been that our attention span is about 8 seconds.
Oh.
And the attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds. So,
Oh, wow.
How do they track that in the goldfish?
exactly. So
Saul.
I say hire the goldfish. He's going to
Goldfish.
pay attention longer.
Yeah.
But my point is, what are the rules of thumb on? Because
Well,
if I get a 9-page resume,
You're
that's
not
pretty
gonna read it.
impressive.
That's right. You're not going to. Who's going to read a 9-page resume? And by the time you get to the bottom of page 2, it's almost like, who cares? So,
But is there exceptions to that? If I'm hiring, the COO, a high level, still the rule of thumb is brevity.
You want to, yeah, you really do. Unless you're applying for a government job, and then
Right.
then
All
they
the rules
want
change, yeah.
8-9 pages. But for the most part, in business, and truthfully, something that you did 15, 20 years ago, chances are it's not being done like that anymore.
It's not relevant.
And chances are the responsibility that you have now is so far and above what you did 15, 20 years ago. It just, obviously, you did something right to get where you are. So, yeah, brevity is still, we want to keep it short, sweet, to the point, with the focus always being on the value add.
And let's face it, I mean, resumes, really the intent of a resume is to get your foot into
Correct.
a door.
Yes,
That-
but in addition to that, it's
Yeah.
to get your foot in the door, but also to help you control the interview conversation.
Yeah, it's a marketing brochure.
Yeah.
Which is why there's an art and a science to it. If someone has a lot of other experience, you could have addendums, but
Right.
you would mark that they were addendums. If it was an attorney and there were precedents, you could have that on a separate sheet, or if that person was a writer, you
Right.
could have all those publications on a separate sheet, so that's optional for the person.
That's
but you
right.
do
Or
want
especially if it's electronic, you can click here for more information, so
That's
they can
right.
inquire
Correct.
based
That's
on their.
right.
correct.
And one more question for me here, real quick, is for Joey. And I have to say, this is the most exciting show maybe this week. Don't tell the other shows about that. I didn't say that. Okay, yeah. Some guy
I
walked
think
through
you
the door.
just did.
All right. So Joey, maybe talk to us about kind of that similar question about marketing. How do folks find you? But also how do you find them? But maybe, and I'll kind of jump off the mic and turn things back over to your actual host in the studio, Mark. But mentors, I'd be interested to find out about folks who are your mentors, or do you mentor? Do you wear the hat as a mentor?
I do both. And mentors are really vitally important. So no matter where you are in your career, you have to have people that have been there before that can get you the advice and the feedback that you need so you can move forward. So that was one of the things I did very early with my business, was to find the right mentors and accountability partners to help me. And to answer your question about networking, we've talked a lot about that. It's really vitally important. People find me through networking. I do get a lot of business through referrals, introductions from clients. I get testimonials from clients, that sort of thing. But being smart about your networking is like the number one thing you can do to find more time in your day, because so many people get caught up in networking and they want to go to events, or they spend a ton of time on social media, but it's not smart. They're not intelligent in terms of, are these the right people for me to connect with? Is this the best use of my time? So really being strategic about where you're going, who you're talking to. It's great to have tons of friends, but at the same time, you want, from a business perspective, to be in touch with the people that are going to hire you so that you can have a successful business. And I've applied that myself. I actually have a spreadsheet in terms of groups that I'm joined every year. And every year, towards the end of the year, I sit down and I say, look at all these associations, those activities. Am I spending 2-3 hours a week going to a networking event? Is that productive? Are they the right people? Are they my clients? Or are they just good people to know? Sometimes it's just good for your own education. But you have to be clear about why you're going and what you hope to accomplish from those. And I say why you're going if you're going to physical. But at the same time, Mark, you mentioned social media. It's the same thing. What are you talking about on social media? Is it relevant to your business, or is it just more chatter that's out there?
And as it relates to the marketing, how involved are you in blogging?
I blog a lot. I think I've lost count of how many blog posts I have out there, but I've been blogging weekly for 5 years now, so I've got quite a few. And my blog is joellyn-sargent.com, which you can get to through my website, but that's the main blog. I have it separate because it's so consistent. And people find me through that. I got a call the other day for an interview with a magazine where the writer had found a post that I did 3 years ago on my blog. And she says, this is really interesting. It's still relevant now. I want to talk to you about it. So it was a great way for me to not only get additional visibility from a PR standpoint, but then also to have info out there people can go to.
And what's your rhythm for your blog? Once a week?
Once a week. I blog once a week, right. Solopreneur.school is a little bit different because I think I mentioned we've got 10 bloggers, and so we've got posts going up several times a week on different topics. But my own personal blog, I just do every Thursday.
Do you see a book coming out of that then?
I actually do have a book. Funny you should ask. In 2014, I released a book called Beyond the Launch. And it started with several blog posts. I did have to do a lot of work to massage that and fill in the gaps, but it was a great way to get started because I thought, I've got all this content. Why not put it together in a format that would be accessible for people? So it's, got my book out there. It's on Kindle.
Nice.
Pick up a copy.
What was the title again?
Beyond the Launch.
And beyond the launch, beyond NASA. So, speaking of launching, recently I had a chance to chat with high school seniors that are applying to college. What words of advice would you have, sage on the stage, for high school seniors that are beginning their journey and also beginning to think about their own careers? Because now they're getting to a point, it's like, what are you going to study?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And some folks know, some don't. And what words of advice do you have?
Well, if I can jump in,
Yeah.
Having 2 children and having been through this process several years ago, I think the best advice that somebody else gave my children is that this is the beginning of your journey, and go to college with an open mind and test the waters and see if there are things that are particularly interesting to you, and don't jump in declaring a major. Go in with an open mind and test things and see what sparks your interest. And if something sparks your interest, then take another class and so forth. And I think that served both of my children really well.
I would second that, yeah.
Yeah.
I started out as a physics major and ended up in art history. Figured that one out. And I've got 2 daughters. One just graduated from college and one just started college. And that's the thing that I tell them is this is the time to explore. And there will be no other time in your life where you have this much freedom to figure out what it is that really gets you excited. Mm-hmm. So take those classes, see what strikes your fancy. And you go through high school, and it's a very clear path, and there's only so many things you can study. But you get to college, and you just look at all the courses that are out there. So many things that you never even knew existed. So it pays to test the waters, because you might think you want to be a doctor, and then all of a sudden you find out that you love horticulture. Who knows?
Well, and we have an average of 7 careers in our lives. Mm-hmm. So it's really important that when you're coaching this individual, that you free them from the necessity of having to decide today what they're going to be doing at age 40 or 45. And that, I think that's driven home when a lawyer comes into my office at 45 and she's done very well in the practice of law, but she really doesn't like it. And I say, well, that's great, because companies love the discipline of someone who's a lawyer. So let's have a conversation about what really gets you excited and what you're passionate about. But with the 18-year-old, I would listen carefully to what it is that they're bringing to that conversation. What are their parents asking them to do? What are they thinking they want to do? If I could, I'd like to be able to test these people and see what their strengths are, see what their interests are, see what their passions are. And is that a conversation for 2015, or is it a conversation for 5 years from now? You maybe do something that's appropriate for right now, but also know that you've got the freedom to take more classes, more courses. You can do them online, you can do them in person, whatever it is. But odds are you'll be changing that career. Mm-hmm. So have that perspective as you go into it, and be a little bit more open.
Mm-hmm. The one piece I provided and to the high school seniors, and parents were looking at me interesting. I said, don't let the classroom get in the way of your education.
That's great advice.
And because to your point, Randy, have an open mind, be open to new things, but don't lock yourself in the library. Don't lock yourself in your dormitory studying. Obviously, there's going to be very disciplined approaches for whatever you might be studying, but there's so much to do, to your point, Joey. on the campus as well, outside the classroom.
And off campus.
Wouldn't
Yes.
it be great to
Yeah.
go back to college now, knowing what I know now?
I know.
Right?
And life's an adventure. I think if you just you have to seize the opportunity to go on the adventure.
Yeah.
You could make a really small box and stay in it for your whole life, but then, as Kit said, you might wake up in 20 years and find out that you're miserable.
But
So-
you know what, though? I think we have a great opportunity since, as kids and young adults are very observant. So they they'll hear the words maybe, but what they observe is how you behave and how you act. And we can model, and we've had to probably model for our kids, how we transition, how we deal with, moving from one role to another, and how elegant we can be with the stress and the emotion around that as well. What are your thoughts on that, being a role model for young adults?
I think it's important to be a role model, but at the same time, people need to know that it's not always pretty.
Right?
Sometimes those transitions are really tough, really ugly, and I think you can't hide that from kids. If they think everything is smooth sailing, then it's a shock to the system when they find out that it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being real and authentic that, I'm having a tough time right now. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next. That's really important to share that, as well as being a great role model that, I'm working hard, I'm accomplishing my goals, all those great lofty sort of things.
Yeah.
I think
It's okay to be okay with ambiguity.
It's okay to be okay with ambiguity. It's okay to admit that sometimes we stumble. We all stumble.
Yeah.
We all have setbacks. And I think showing that happens and then demonstrating how you deal with it is probably the best example that you can set.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that when you're working with your current clients, is there a fair amount of ambiguity in their own mind sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes there is. Sometimes there is. And I think that people, once again, and I think I've mentioned this before, it's being open to new ideas and open to put yourself out there and open to exploring things with other people and sharing ideas and say, what do you think? Or talking to people that do the kind of work that you might be interested in doing and saying, what's it like? What does it take to be successful in this kind of work? What skills and competencies do you have to be successful? And kind of getting the advice and counsel of other people and not being afraid to do that. And I think a lot of times people don't want to ask other people for help, but most people want to help. Mm-hmm. If you give them the opportunity and you let them know what it is that you need their assistance with, people want to help.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a compliment. When
Yeah.
you ask someone for their advice, you're acknowledging their wisdom and their assistance to take you somewhere
Mm-hmm.
you can't take yourself, which is great. As far as ambiguity, I don't meet a lot of ambiguity. Most people want to follow what they've been doing in the past, but they can start doing vocational activities. Avocational, as we say, is that they can get into other things that also make them happy. It's always a discussion about money and what's real. What does pay? What can you do right now? And then what can be done in 10 years if you ease your way over into that area and have those conversations. That's absolutely wonderful. It's all the conversation of what color is your parachute, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the continuing journey and the risk and the adventure, but holding on to the job and then going on and doing many other things while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to explore.
Yeah.
And I find my clients, because they're very entrepreneurial, they tend to be comfortable with ambiguity. The challenge is, how do you move beyond that so you don't live in that state of ambiguity?
Well,
how do you choose your path?
And and how do you make money?
Yeah, and how do you make money? So a lot of times we'll explore an option. They may say, well, I'm thinking about bringing out this service, or I'm thinking about going into this market. And so we'll set some time aside to explore that. And it might be putting together a project, seeing if it's something that people will buy, that sort of thing. And then they can make a decision that's a little bit more fact-based of, yes, this will work, or no, it won't. Or, gee, I really don't like that. I'm not going to do that. So I think getting through the ambiguity, like you said, to get the clarity about where you should be going is important.
Yeah. The SBA says it takes 3 to 5 years to keep your money. In those 3 to 5 years of starting a company, all your cash goes back into your ideas. And getting all your assistance and getting all your getting your blogs and all the time that it takes. What is real? I think that the toughest thing is to talk to an entrepreneur who didn't make it and had the passion. That would be a rich conversation, and that's not a segue.
I tried.
I was already.
It'd be a rich conversation about what parts of those can we go and find in other work. and help you with your passion, and then somehow keep that door open for the future. It may just have been the wrong time for it.
Right. Sometimes it's just taking stock of those lessons.
Yeah.
What did you learn? And then,
What
you may come back to that in a few
Yeah.
years and do it, well, like I did. I mean, I
Yeah.
started one business, and then 20 years later I started another using what I had discovered along the way.
Yeah,
So-
which is super.
And we've had a very engaging conversation. It's been great to have Joey-Sargent of Claravon, as well as Solopreneur.
Solopreneur.school. Yes.
Solopreneur.school. Randi-Levy from ResumeWorks, and kit-kammer from the Impact Group with us today. And I will do a quick round robin so that people can, again, zero in if they want to reach out to you directly, what's the best way to do that. And so, Kit, we'll start with you.
Well, an easy way also is LinkedIn. It's Kit, K-I-T. Last name is K-A-M-M-E-R. And I'll also have my local number is 404-974-9153. So that would be the easiest.
Excellent. Randy?
Thank you. Okay, I also am on LinkedIn. It's Randi with an I, R-A-N-D-I, and my last name is Levy, L-E-V-Y, and the best way to reach me is 404-308-2952. And thanks again for giving me the opportunity to launch your new show.
Wonderful to have you here. And Joey?
Yes, thank you. It's been lots of fun, and I am also on LinkedIn. I'm Sargent, S-A-R-G-E-N-T. My website is Claravon.com, and of course, Solopreneur.school is solopreneur.school. And thank you so much for having us. It's been a lot of fun to kick things off for you.
Excellent. And I am mark-myette, and the way to reach me is mark-myette, M-Y-E-T-T-E. Get me through LinkedIn. And Rich, I'll turn it to you, sir.
All right, Mark, congratulations again on your inaugural show. Great conversation. I took a couple of pages of notes, had some questions I'll ask after off the air since we are wrapping up this episode of Entrepreneur Radio, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you again for joining Mark Myette and his guests on the Pro Business Channel. Use the social media links here to share today's show, and stay tuned for the next episode of Wantrepreneur Radio.